Hello guys, this is Riyadeshwar. You're back on my channel Crux of English, and today we are going to talk about the next writer of the modern age, which is D.H. Lawrence. Now he is most known for Sons and Lovers. I think everyone knows that. Okay, the first thing that you need to remember about D.H. Lawrence, let's see, is that he was born in 1885 and then he died in 1950. He used to write poetry and novels, and his poetry was made famous by Ford Madox Ford. That's another writer of modern age that we are going to talk about later. Ford Madox Ford made his poetry famous. He was in love with a woman called Frenda. Frenda was an aristocrat. She belonged to an aristocrat family. E.M. Forster has said about him that greatest imaginative novelist of all time. Greatest imaginative novelist of all time. This was said by E.M. Forster for D.H. Lawrence. E.M. Forster is another one of the writers, and we are going to discuss him later on because he's part of the Victorian age, but right now we are talking about the modern age. Other things about D.H. Lawrence: he used to write these kind of novels that were romantic clef. Okay, romantic clef. What are romantic clefs? Romantic clefs are the novels that are written with a different key. There's a book, then there is a key to that book. So here in the book, the characters are represented through historical figures. Okay, so in the key you would find different historical references to the characters. For example, if I started writing a book today and I used characters, if I'm writing a book about Russia and I'm using characters like Stalin and Leo Tolstoy, or these characters that are historically important, that have been historically written about, I start using those characters and then I give references of those characters in a romantic clef. Then the key would be the romantic clef to that novel. And D.H. Lawrence was famous for writing romantic clefs. He wrote a book called Point Counterpoint with Aldous Huxley. We'll talk about this writer as well in the next video of the modern age. Aldous Huxley, he wrote this book. D.H. Lawrence wrote Point Counterpoint with Aldous Huxley, and we will discuss Point Counterpoint when we talk about Aldous Huxley. Now let's talk about the books of D.H. Lawrence. The first that we are going to talk about is Peacock. This came out in 1911 and this was inspired by a painting about industrialization. Okay, there was a painting about industrialization, because of which D.H. Lawrence got inspired and he wrote, it's called White Peacock. He wrote the book called White Peacock. Now, next book that we are going to talk about is Sons and Lovers. Sons and Lovers is the most popular book of D.H. Lawrence, and it was quite criticized because there was this concept of Oedipus complex in this book as the main character, which was Paul Morrell was in love with his mother and Miriam both. Miriam was Paul Morrell's lover, and Paul Morrell was in love with his mother and Miriam as well. Sons and Lovers is said to be semi-autobiographical, meaning there would be some similarities between the main character, that is Paul Morrell, and D.H. Lawrence. And Paul Morrell, one of the similarities was the Paul Morrell's father was a mine worker, worked in mines, and so did D.H. Lawrence. Okay, this was how the book was structured. Now, I just told you that Paul Morrell was suffering from Oedipus complex. Someone asked me what Oedipus complex is, so let me explain it to you. Oedipus complex is when you have you are connected romantically or have feelings for your mother. This is a concept that was given by Freud, and you would see this concept in novels like Sons and Lovers, and also there's an essay about Oedipus complex in Hamlet. Hamlet is a play written by Shakespeare, which is a very famous essay. So what is Oedipus complex? Oedipus complex is a concept that was given by Freud. I just wrote that, I'm sorry. Oedipus complex is a concept that is given by Freud, where a male child is attracted to his mother. The opposite of Oedipus complex is Electra complex. Electra complex is when a female child is attracted to their father. Now, you cannot say that this has to be romantic. Okay, there is no evidence of that this has to be romantic. A child, when in Indian childhood especially, if you would see that mothers are usually more connected with their sons, and daughters are more connected with their fathers, which is quite a representation of Oedipus and Electra complex. Oedipus complex is when a male child is more attached towards his mother than his father, and Electra complex is when a child is more attracted to when the female child is more attracted to her father. Now, Oedipus complex comes from Oedipus Rex. You should all know that. This is a Greek story, Oedipus Rex. This comes from Oedipus complex, comes from Oedipus Rex, which is about Oedipus Rex. Oedipus is a king who eventually kills his father, marries his mother, and has 3 children with his mother. It is all by chance, and it happened not purposefully, but it happened, which is why Freud has named Oedipus complex after Oedipus Rex. And Electra is the daughter of Agamemnon, which is another Greek myth, and Electra is the daughter of Agamemnon, and Electra kills his mother when her mother betrays her father, which was Agamemnon. If you want, please do comment down below, and I will actually make a different video about the entire concept that Freud gave about Oedipus complex and Electra complex, and how what is the story of Oedipus Rex and Agamemnon, which made Freud name Electra and Oedipus complex after that. Now let's talk about D.H. Lawrence. We were talking about Sons and Lovers, and I've already told you that it is filled with Oedipus complex. Now, the next book, you should know the last line of this book, which is Sons and Lovers. It says, he walked towards the faintly glowing, humming town quietly. This is the last line of the book that is written of Sons and Lovers. He walked towards the faintly glowing, humming town quickly. Now, he here is Paul Morrell. Okay, this is all about the book Sons and Lovers. Now, let's talk about the next book of D.H. Lawrence, which is the next book of D.H. Lawrence is Widowing of Mrs Hoard. This came out in 1914. That's all you need to remember. The story is somewhat like this, that Mrs Hoard's husband beats her a lot, and because of which she wants her husband to die, and he eventually dies, and because of which Mrs Hoard feels a really bad guilt, and she has this bond formed with him after he's dead, which was not really there when he was alive. That is all about Widowing of Mrs Hoard. The next book is called Rainbow. This came out in 1915. This is about 3 generations of Brangwyn family. That's all you need to remember about this book. There's a sequel to this book called Rainbow, which is called Women in Love. This book is based on homosexual relationships. This came out in 1920. It is a sequel to Rainbow, and this is about Brangwyn sisters called Gundrum and Ursula. These are two sisters that are Brangwyn sisters, and the book is basically about homosexual relationships. And because of this book was actually banned in 1920, and it didn't come out for a very long time, and it was quite against the will of the people at the time. So there was this headline that came out about this book. It said, a book police should ban loathsome study of sex depravity, misleading youth to unspeakable disasters. Why? Because this was just about homosexual relationships. The first chapter was suppressed because there was the love making that was seen between two women, and the first line of the book is, the Brangwyn sisters were working and talking. This is the first line of the book. So what you need to remember, Rainbow was the first book that came out about the Brangwyn family. There are 3 generations of Brangwyn family in the book Rainbow. It came out in 1915. Then the second book that came out was called Women in Love. This is the sequel of Rainbow, which came out in 1920. This is about the Brangwyn sisters called Gundrum and Ursula. The first line of the book is, the Brangwyn sisters were working and talking. This is about homosexual relationships. The first chapter was suppressed, and there was a headline that came out in the newspapers which said, this is a book that police should ban because it is misleading the youth into disastrous relationships. Now, the next book that we are going to talk about is called Birds, Bees and Flowers. This came out in 1923. It was a poetry collection. It was about different animals and different bees and different flowers, and there are different poems that came out in it. There has been asked a question from it about the poem Snake. Now, the question wasn't asked about the poem, it was something like that, what collection and what writer does the poem Snake belong to? The Snake belongs to the Birds, Bees and Flowers, which is written by D.H. Lawrence. Now, the next book is Kangaroo. Kangaroo came out in 1923. There's a famous line from Kangaroo which says, on or about 1910, human character changes. Virginia Woolf wrote it was in 1915 the old world ended. In his or her novels, picking a date for far more historical movement, the entire tradition seemed to end in war. This was written by Lawrence in the book called Kangaroo. This is a very famous line, and this has been asked repeatedly by UGC NET. I am repeating the line again so that you can write it. On or about 1910, word human characters change. Virginia Woolf wrote it was 1915 the old world ended. In his or her novels, picking a date of far more historical movement, the entire tradition comes to an end in war. This is what Lawrence wrote in Kangaroo. Now, the next is the last book that we are going to talk about is called Lady Chatterley's Lover. This first appeared in 1928, but it was published in 1970 because this was banned. Again, this was seen as really horrendous for the time period that D.H. Lawrence was writing in, because this showed a relationship between a high class woman and a lower class man. So this book was banned because there was seen a relationship between a high class woman and a lower class man, which was seen as really horrendous in the age that D.H. Lawrence was writing. Therefore, Lady Chatterjee's Lover, which is again one of the most popular novels of D.H. Lawrence, was written in 1920, but it came out in 1970 because it was banned in US and UK both. Now that was all about D.H. Lawrence, another writer of the modern age. The next writer that we are going to talk about is Aldous Huxley. That is another writer of modern age. So thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and keep watching the videos on the modern age, and I keep uploading videos of the series of the writers of the modern age, which I think is one of the most important topics when it comes to UGC NET. And as you have UGC NET coming in December, and there would be a lot of people who are attempting this for the first time, so I would suggest you keep watching these videos, and I think it will be really helpful for you. Thank you for watching.